Carving out some time. Going to open up for about 20 minutes, give or take. Let's get started. Everybody?
So, who you going to take at 5?
Well, it is the entertainment business. I don't know if we were to announce that right now that many people would feel the need to watch on night one. So there's still a lot of fun dialogue to be had amongst our crew. It's great. We got the scouting staff on site and in the building for the first time this week. So kind of rounding out a lot of the conversations that we've had with the coaching staff over the last month and really allowing the cement to settle and start to harden here as we creep towards night one of the draft and that 5th overall selection.
So for both of you, what has it been like going through this process, kind of leading the way for the first time? I mean, you as a head coach, you as a first-time general manager, what has this been like?
Yeah, I'll start and kick it over to Liam, but at the end of the day, it's still familiar territory. You're talking football. And, my mind remains rooted in a lot of the same things that it always has been, and I think you all will remember this phrase, but focusing our attention on intangibly rich human beings and allow that to remain our North Star and making it so that, it's very clear amongst our group that that's really what we're leaning into and having everybody embrace that and feel that it's been a joy. It's been fulfilling and really looking forward to allowing those discussions to become reality. And we're not far off from that, but just like the players that are included in this draft class, right? Their dream is to get drafted. And for those guys, that's about to be reality. And it's been fun to have that be the case for us personally, to see our dreams become reality and, working in tandem. It's been fulfilling. It's been a joy.
One of the biggest issues with this team last year, in a lot of people's minds, was the lack of toughness in both interior lines. You invested considerable capital in free agency, helped reinforce that, and I'm just wondering if you feel like the draft is also another avenue to add reinforcements to that, because it seems like you can never have enough in terms of competition at those positions.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because something that's been very clear to both Liam and I, and it's something that we both value innately, is physical and mental toughness. And I know that probably was apparent, and that just by default, the offensive line and defensive line, that breeds that sort of mentality and that type of play. We prioritized addressing offensive line through pro free agency, and I think we'll continue to do that throughout the draft, but I don't think we're limited at the fronts, right? That stuff should show up at all levels of our offensive and defensive operation, and clearly on special teams, that's always going to remain at the forefront. But those two elements in tandem is really a real combination that we covet. And I think you'll hear just about every time that Liam steps to a podium, he's going to mention some version of physical and mental toughness as really what he's hunting up.
As a follow-up to that, for either one of you, how bothersome was it for either of you that on 3rd and 1 last year, the Jaguars' batting average was barely over 50%?
Yeah, I think that's something that ultimately you look at last year. I think in the NFL we were first in Tampa in short yardage, and although I'd love to say that we just ran duo down everybody's throat, I can't say that. There was some misdirection, jet sweeps, whatever it was, different ways of getting that yard. And ultimately, yes, you'd love to say, man, hey, we got to just gain a yard. We should be able to do this with the most simple plays in football. But it just depends on how you're built and what those matchups look like, obviously. And it is on us as coaches to hopefully put those guys in better positions to be successful that way.
James, can you take us through the decision not to do in-person visits, the strategy kind of behind not bringing prospects here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to not doing those facility visits that you all are probably accustomed to, or those top 30 visits, as they're phrased. But, that goes back a while for me in my experience. I think, just think about, let's take it this direction, the implicit bias that can come to life this late in the process. The last player you might sit down with and how that might differ from the first player you sit down with, knowing that it's closer to the decision that's upcoming. In addition to that, so much of the work that's done in preparation for these decisions starts years in advance. And, you know, the sourced intel from those who have lived with these individuals is likely to be more accurate than me sitting down with a prospect for a short period of time and attempting to dissect who that human being is. And so I don't know that I don't view myself as having this extreme superpower of deciphering the complexity of a person in an hour, right? I would probably say I can work that in tandem, but there are other mechanisms that we tend to lean into to help us determine whether or not a player is in fact a fit for us, more than just a singular touch point that would be a top 30 visit. We have a lot of additional mechanisms that we deploy that don't necessarily put us at risk for the rest of the world to know which direction we're heading as well, because so often those become public facing touch points, at which point you're sacrificing some version of strategy come draft day as well.
As a follow-up to that, I'm just curious, in your less than 2 months' time here, James, how much have you been able to implement in terms of that strategy, in terms of whether it's bringing the JARS program here to Jacksonville? Obviously, you know, you bring some of your friends from there into the front office here so far, but how much have you actually been able to implement in terms of that process itself?
Yeah, there are some specific efficiencies that we've been able to sort of fold into the process, and in large part there's a good bit of information already at our disposal and a lot of internal knowledge that already exists that's really helpful. You know, having our scouting staff on site for the first time this week, all being under the same roof, it was really cool. We got a chance to sit down yesterday and chop through a large chunk of the prospects and got a chance to share with them my impressions of day one with them. And so often, let's just set the stage. You get into a draft meeting, and each person has a piece of paper or a notebook in front of them or their laptop, and they're referencing their reports that they've done on each of the prospects, looking down, reading those reports out loud. Something I appreciate more than anything is when an evaluator or a scout treats those moments like you're at the water cooler, like you're just having a normal conversation as opposed to this boardroom meeting. And our group inherently did that. They made it just a natural conversation. And they didn't just revert to their notes, but rather what they already knew in their minds, because they were so prepared for that moment on their own. So that was a really cool moment for me to see our scouting staff walk in the door as prepared as I could have ever hoped for those initial conversations. I used the phrase being a fighter, not a fencer, right? Instead of having to put on armor, pick up a sword to fight, they simply just had to close their fist. They were ready for that moment. And I look forward to the rest of the conversations that we're going to have here over the next 9 days and see what else settles as the cement begins to harden.
Let's go to the back, if you could. James, just the entire process of you being in LA and all the scouting that you did, and then to come here and see what Trent and Ethan and their staff have, just kind of comparing and contrasting, how difficult was that? And was there anything during that process that maybe really surprised you, or perhaps, you know, just caught you off guard?
Yeah, I don't know that there were any surprises or anything catching me off guard as much as it was, it's been very impressive, the adaptability of that group to say, hey, here are the items that we're emphasizing and that we'll be prioritizing, may look a little different than what you're used to, and being able to see them sort of pivot away from maybe things that they held at a premium in the past. And so that flexibility has really stood out to me amongst the group.
What's your comfort level in terms of talking trades and things like that? Do you like to have those discussions a few days prior to Thursday night, or are you pretty comfortable, even if it's on the clock, being able to make that kind of move quickly?
Yeah, I think adaptability is going to be key through that. It's never going to be done until, you know, it gets sent into the league. So we'll have as many conversations as people are willing to engage on, and I don't think that now versus on the clock is going to be anything that I would say isn't of interest.
When do you like to have your board kind of final?
Yeah, right before we pick. I mean, it's interesting. It's not so black and white, right? You can probably think about the decisions you make in a day, and especially when you have the chance to sleep on it, whether or not it's the right one or the wrong one. And we've gone through a ton of exercises over the last 5 weeks to where we sleep with decisions, right? And we say, this is exactly what we're doing over the course of the draft. How do we feel about this outcome? And we wrestle with that, we sit with it, we reflect, and then we try a new one. And that's been fun because I know it's not something that the larger group has been used to doing, at least in that long of a runway. But for me, it's the way in which my mind works. And I've, in the past, experienced the moments when you send in a pick, you know when you press enter whether or not it was the right one for you. And that's what I've enjoyed doing over the last handful of weeks with our group, and sort of treating it like we just pressed enter and trying to wrestle with whether or not that felt the best, or if it's exactly what we would have wanted to be the case. And so just like any player going out onto the grass in preparation for a Sunday, we actually want to treat these reps like real life. And so trying to create that as often as possible has been certainly enjoyable, but look forward to it actually bringing with it some positive results here soon.
To that point, could you kind of map out what the next week and a half is for you guys from a process standpoint? What kind of things will you go through to try to be as prepared as you can be for the actual draft?
Yeah, I can. So right now we're using the mornings with our scouting staff, afternoon with our coaching staff. We'll do that throughout the remainder of this week. And then into next week, we got mock drafts that we'll just simulate at the beginning of the week before getting to draft day.
And when you go through the mock draft situation, what are you doing to pull as much information as you can to have that be as accurate as possibly can?
I say that it's more operationally to make sure that all of our tech is functioning as much as it is like actually having a draft come off, so to speak.
So, James, I kind of looked up my own version of Intangibly Rich, right?
Good, glad.
So hopefully we kind of got this right.
So not only are our fans now intangibly curious, so is our media group.
Intangibly Rich ecosystem, I've been on it, man. But really, at number 5, is it, I hate to make it sound easy, is it more obvious? Do you have to pay attention to the intangibles? Because it's kind of like the intangibles, sometimes things that you don't see that aren't obvious. At 5, isn't a little more obvious, especially if you're not in the market for a quarterback?
Is it more obvious? I would like to think it's pretty obvious, but a lot of this, it just requires discipline. Like, for the most part, you become so intimate in understanding who these people are in the build-up to those draft day decisions that by the end of it, you know what you're taking on, and you have to make the decision as to whether or not you can accept that person for who they are. And the people that we will accept for who they are and invite and select will be those that are intangibly rich. And people, again, I know I've been asked quite often, like, what does that actually mean? And I promise that whatever just came to your mind is what I'm thinking. Like, it exists. It's in my mind as well as yours. But I was asked right off the jump, physical and mental toughness. Like, that's a part of intangibly rich, and it's a big part of it. So those 2 elements will be top of mind. I mean, when you look at our draft day call sheet, the items that we're bucketing in that intangibly rich category are the largest, brightest number and color on our call sheet. And it's because that's where we start. At every point of player acquisition, that's where we start. Doesn't mean that it'll be exactly the order that we select in or pick or choose from, but it will be where we begin every decision.
When you look at the depth chart of this draft by position, could you outline maybe a couple of positions where you think it's deep enough where whether you draft a player early in the 2nd or middle of the 3rd or first round versus 2nd, where you think that you could still get a pretty darn decent player without it being a significant drop-off?
Yeah, quite frankly, I think that every draft there ends up being players that are very good at all positions from start to finish. And I think that probably doesn't come as a surprise when you look at the most recent drafts that I've been a part of, especially with those day 3 selections, and even those undrafted college free agents who in Los Angeles had played a high volume of snaps and contributed in a significant way early in their rookie contract. So, yeah, I think there are some public-facing positions that everybody has a pretty good understanding that are deep in this year's draft, but I don't think there's a single position that we would label as being without talent, and all of them can produce somebody for us that would contribute in a notable way fairly early in their rookie contract along the entirety of the draft.
Let's get Liam.
Could I get one quick follow-up to Liam? What is your assessment of the receiving core of this draft in terms of its talent, in terms of its viability as a fit for your franchise?
Yeah, I think there's some just good, sound, solid players at a few different spots where there's also some ball in hand athletes. There's also a couple guys that can win 50-50 balls. There's some really good football players all throughout this draft at the position. I wouldn't say it's maybe as sparkling as some other drafts, right? Where you do see, there's a couple good ones up there, and we feel good about some of the guys a little bit later on that we can contribute for us. Definitely a position that we'd be looking for.
James, last time we talked to you at the podium, you referenced the defensive tackle, the edge rooms, and the idea of getting rookies in here, getting them on the grass early. So this may be a question more for Coach Camp than you, Liam, but what are you looking for when it comes to an edge or a defensive tackle player? A lot's been made, especially this last week nationally, about is a player rugged enough to play the edge? What are traits that you and your staff look for at those positions?
Yeah, first of all, physically and mentally tough comes to mind, and guys that can set an edge in the run game, play long. That doesn't mean they have to be 6'4", 260, but can they set an edge and play long and stout in the run game, while also maybe giving you a different version of a rush plan, right? A little bit of a different wave of rusher that can maybe come in and do some different things in some third downs, get back on track situations, that can potentially burn an edge and be able to get off the edge and go a little bit for us. So definitely something that we're looking for.
John? Liam, you talked about leaning on rookies a little bit before. Just knowing how many draft picks you guys have, how many potential spots for undrafted guys to add on to the roster, does that excite you knowing you guys are about to add a high number of young guys to the roster soon?
It is exciting. I mean, those, like I mentioned last time, conversation we had with the staff, and something that we don't want to fear whatsoever. And I think naturally as a coach, you just go to a safe place of a veteran, which I completely respect and appreciate. But it's definitely something we're going to lean into. The guys should be excited about it. You can continue to coach hard and get the best out of these guys when they're freshly in the league and really want to do best. So we're excited about that factor.
Liam, what is the thing you enjoy the most, or the thing that's been the biggest adjustment for you going through this process now as a head coach? Probably a little bit more input than you had before, right?
Yeah, just, having a larger appreciation for every position on the grass, including special teams when we're evaluating a wideout or a DB, a safety, a corner, a back, or a tight end. Well, what can his special teams contribution be as well? That's not something I ever really had to go to that place. And so that's been exciting to learn more about from James, from the other coaches, seeing their vision for these players. And that's been a huge learning curve for me and experience, where you're normally just, hey, offense, every time you watch an offensive player, defensive players pop. And your eyes start to go to those players that pop. Well, now it's truly evaluating, hey, how does this player fit into our roster right now? Where can we see them playing on each down and distance, packages, things like that, where you start to try to tweak your thinking a little bit.
James, do you let yourself think about the first pick setting the tone for the entire tenure of your regime and how that, yes, the first rookie class, but really the first pick kind of does that?
I think naturally that's absolutely where your mind goes, and we've had discussions on that subject a number of times, and certainly feel really good about the pot of players right now that we're discussing, and that would align with all the messages that we would like to send to the locker room, to our fan base, to the greater football landscape about who the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be moving forward.
Did you guys do a local pro day?
No, we did not.
Is that philosophy, or is that because maybe just the local schools didn't have maybe what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think in a similar breath as the top 30 visits, it's familiar territory for me to not participate in that. And I think it was certainly based off where we were at, this being the first cycle that we're working together, spending that energy in a different way made sense.
It seems like more and more top picks lately are not testing during off-season athletic testing. How do you guys adjust to get the full picture of a player when you maybe don't have those numbers?
Yeah, I think so often, that's a great question, by the way. I think many people are leaning in a different direction than just strictly those testing and measurement marks. Certainly it's helpful when you can compare apples to apples from one player to the next, but data tracking for us and on-field speeds is going to weigh much differently than a 40-yard dash.
We have time for 2 or 3 more.
In terms of who you have in the locker room right now, this is for you, Coach. When it comes to Brian Thomas Jr. being that number 1, who do you say confidently is that number 2 and 3 that could take the pressure off of Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, I think we're going to spread the ball out hopefully equally. That was the nice thing about being last year with Tampa, and we had to play a lot of different players in different personnel groupings. I think you look just naturally right now at Parker Washington and Diami Brown at the receiver positions, and then saying that, hey, Brenton Strange hopefully continues to ascend. How do we use our 2 running backs to be able to supplement some of that usage, right? And be able to get more people involved in the game, especially early on, so that defenses can't just cloud, BT and be all over him, that we do have other guys that can go win and be explosive with the ball in their hands and ultimately share that wealth and share that playmaking ability, so that once the ball is snapped for the beginning of the game, and then within the first quarter, if you haven't touched the ball, it's a hard one to continue to get through. So how do we get all of our playmakers a touch early on to get them going and get them involved in the game? And those guys that I just mentioned right now are guys that we're going to spotlight.
Justin.
When you're filling out your draft board and you have teams that will not take guys simply because they've been character concerns or off the field issues. When you're doing your draft board, is there something that you're not, when you're looking at, you're taking these guys off the board and you won't draft them regardless?
Oh, yeah, there are quite a few things. I think at the end of the day, we focus the majority of our attentions on who it is that we're really interested, who fits the profile for really what we want to invite into this environment. And if you're not intangibly rich, it's gonna be a hard time for that person to really mesh here. And I think those that will thrive in the environment that we create and cultivate are going to be people that fit the mold for what we've talked about to date, and that is all the physical and mental toughness attributes. And if you don't meet those thresholds that we've set, it's going to be something that we sort of go in a different direction from.
2 more and we're done. Mark.
James, when you're talking about trying to get to intangibly rich and you don't have top 30 visits and you're not necessarily on site for pro day, what are some of the other mechanisms you touched on in getting that information?
Yeah, some of those we like to keep sort of in-house and private just because we feel it's a version of a competitive advantage, while at the same time you can look towards the traditional metrics and ways about going to understand who a person is from an intangible standpoint, and that is rooted in the film evaluation and some of the things that aren't necessarily related to a physical quality. And then you get into the sourced information from a player's past, right? Whether it's college campus, a hometown, et cetera. So all those things begin to get weighted and surface sort of our thresholds for whether or not there's somebody we feel like fits our mold.
Have you had to teach that to your staff of how to get that information?
Yeah, in terms of our current staff, they're already going down the traditional methods of bringing that stuff to life. And then in terms of decision making, leveraging that in a way that may not be sort of the traditional model for what the Jaguars have seen in the past. But at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily require any additional education, but will into the future as we have full cycles to work with as a full scouting staff.
Okay, we'll wrap it up with D-Rock here.
Not to be, I guess, like a smart ass, but intangibly rich, was that a phrase you guys used at the Rams, or did you kind of bring that over? Or
It's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Where did
Yeah.
you come up with? That's what I'm just intrigued.
I don't know. When did I say it for the first time? Was it my? Yeah, I think it came. look, so much of that stuff, it really does. It resonates for both Liam and I, but we've got a lot of spin-offs.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of spin-offs, but
that was Ashley, my wife.
yes.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you got to drop that one in there every now and then. But no, I think naturally that is what both Liam and I are built on. And so we gravitate towards those types of people. And so I don't know that it was anything other than just what surfaced at the moment, I guess at my first press conference. But it definitely is something I want to hang on to. And I'm not ready to release that yet because I keep saying it at every chance I get, right? But I think in some way, shape, or form, it paints a picture for what it is that we're hunting up.
How many times did you have to explain it to your guys in-house?
Oh, that doesn't take much because most evaluations generally include some version of physical qualities and intangible qualities already rooted in what you're measuring. So it didn't take much time for them to understand, oh, this is the bucket that we're leaning into as a driver for our decisions. Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Good luck.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys.
Everybody. Hope you enjoyed lunch. It's good to see you.